Hello and welcome back to my Factorio 1.0 tutorial Let's Play series. I'm Xterminator and thank you for joining me here again. And we have a little bit of a thing to fix. I goofed up last episode and several of you pointed it out. So we just have a quick fix to start us off here. And then we're going to, well, first off, actually, let's defend this attack really quickly. I can see them coming. Then we're going to work a little bit on our maul, and then probably get ourselves into some combat, since we are being attacked fairly frequently. And then probably maybe try to make our way towards oil a little bit. So the mistake is I accidentally cut this circuit belt right here. I didn't notice it. Sometimes you miss things, and you know, for the viewers, for those of you who have a different perspective and aren't, you know, deep into things playing, as you know, a lot of times when you're playing, you can just miss things in your own game, and then an observer can see them quite easily. So thank you so much for pointing that out. I would have noticed eventually when science stopped working. It is actually quite behind now, probably because of that. So that was a little bit of a mistake. It happens. Actually, I think we're gonna maybe get into some combat first because we are being attacked really frequently at this point. Also, someone else mentioned in the comments, which is a very good point, that this is actually overproduction of the ammo. That this ratio, the one firearm to 3 of these, this is correct. The thing is, this is actually more piercing ammo than we need for this amount of military science. So what we can do, which is actually going to be quite helpful for us, is we can take a filter inserter here. We will need a filter inserter for this. And I'm going to extend this belt by 1. And then I'm going to put this at the end here. And we're going to pull all the excess piercing ammunition from this belt after it feeds the science what it needs to use for ourselves and turrets and such. Now, we're using a filter inserter. So we can come in here, and click on it, and select a filter, which is going to say you can either whitelist it or blacklist it. Whitelist it means it can only pick up that. Blacklist means it can pick up anything except that. In this case, we want whitelist. That's usually the most common, I would say. And this is, we're doing this so that, I'm actually going to use a small power pole here. So that it doesn't pick up walls. We don't really want the walls in this box. We, of course, do want some walls built up in a box. But if we put them, if we have one inserter try to do both, it's going to not do them evenly and fill up kind of with the wrong amount of things. So we're going to do this now. We could wire this as well, and maybe with some circuit network stuff to make it put the amount we want in there, but then we risk the possibility of it picking up an item and filling and reaching the limit of the condition we had set, and then still having like that item, like part of the stack of that item in its hand, and then not being able to continue. Inserters can kind of get stuck like that once in a while. So I am actually going to cap this though. It won't stack for now. They stack to 200, which should be certainly sufficient. Shift right click there to take half of it. And we are doing this after science because we of course want to make sure that science gets everything it needs first, and then any excess past that will go there. So let's actually create another turret or two. This one here I'm going to repair up. And with piercing ammunition, we should quite easily be able to push this base. I'm going to change this out for piercing ammo at this point. I'm going to dump a fair bit. I say a fair bit, not very much, but a decent amount in our hotbar here. And this will pretty quickly shred through the biters and the worm and the bases. I'm just going to clear these guys out myself so I can quickly just run up and place these where I want. Now, one thing with turrets is they will basically stay on the target they initially focused on until the thing is dead. So you do have to be a little careful and maybe protect them, because as you saw there, they started shooting the base, and then even though biters came and attacked them, they won't switch target until the initial thing they locked onto is dead. So that's something to keep in mind. You know, you may need to protect them there a little bit, and this is where we get a little bit more risky. I'm going to equip my one fish. If anything, I'm slightly worried about the fact that we may not have enough ammo to complete this here, but we'll see what we can do. I'm going to focus these worms myself, except I have no ammo. I'm going to try to repair these guys up here. These turrets are actually out of ammo as well, so at this point we're going to retreat. And just quickly get that here with our shotgun. So we took out most of it. We definitely could have continued there if we had enough ammunition. We'll come back for that here in a little bit. So let's work on a bit more of our mall. Mostly I would just like to get some inserters, potentially some medium power pole production going here. I'm actually going to pick up a little more ammunition though, since if we do get attacked, we're going to be in a bit of a tough spot. Take some of that and just make sure these are all running fully. It looks like they are, which is fantastic. Okay, so we know if we want medium power poles, we're going to need to bring steel over here, but let's work on the inserters first, since we do have pretty much everything we need for those. Not going to worry about burner inserters. Like I said, the only thing I really use those for is power, so I'm fine with just handcrafting some of those when I end up needing them. And luckily, the normal inserters do not take burner inserters, even though these take the previous version. We're lucky enough to have the inserters not have that requirement of the previous one. So we need everything we have here. We need iron, we need gears, and we also need circuits. Of course, our gears and circuits are on the opposite side of the production area here. However, it's easy enough to run one over. Now, I'm going to do a little pre-planning, knowing here the fact that we're going to need upgraded versions of this, and I've actually, unfortunately, I've blocked myself in a little bit here, where to get these, I've actually blocked myself in a little bit, because this requires the transport belts, so I've kind of blocked myself in. We can add it over here, which I think is probably what I'm going to do. We're lucky enough to not have the splitters or the undergrounds require the red belt itself, but we're going to place that there. I'm going to place that there, and I'm actually going to ghost place that as well there. So that's where our red belt production is going to go. It's not perfect, but it should work. And then after that, we're going to work on inserters. So let's build... now after that, of course there is blue versions and even higher a third tier, but by the time we get to that point you need it, I'm very likely going to be not using belts, probably using robots, in fact. So I think that we probably won't need to continue with this particular mall here at that point. So I'm not really going to worry about the blue. I will focus here a bit on the inserters. I want to leave room so we have space to output the red splitters here. But let's work on inserters. So we have our circuits here. We have our iron here. The only thing left to do at this point is to bring over the gears. And of course, there's many different ways in which we can do this. I think the way I might choose here is something a little bit like this. And this may seem... There's certainly other ways to do this. There's maybe better ways to do this, but I think this is a perfectly acceptable method. So obviously we are going to have a box here outputting the splitters, but it can go right here and not interfere with this underground belt. I left this space here because we know we're going to need an inserter right here passing these through. So that's the reason I did that. And now we can bring this over. Let's switch back to our building hotbar. Again, I'm doing shift in the number key to switch between them. Of course, if you had more than two set up, you could just use higher number keys, shift 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. We finished research finally. That did take a while. Let's get engines? Sure. Yeah. Because we actually do need that for things like fluid handling and oil, which is what we're trying to progress towards. So definitely want to get that. Let's make a few more of these fast inserters. We're about to automate those, thank goodness. And then, much like we've done, I think trying to... I wanted to maybe put it across here, but that's not super possible with this potential underground here. So we'll just put them in a box right here. And we'll do a similar wire condition, I think, as we did with the belt. Because I may want some normal inserters here and there, particularly for things like smelting. I usually stick with normal inserters on smelting all the way up until we can get really like beefy furnace setups. I was going to say like specifically, but I don't want to give too many spoilers for you guys. We can get our smelting to be incredibly fast with some supplemental buildings later on, but that is quite a long ways away, so having some normal inserters I think is probably fine. Let's see here. There's no good way to do this, I suppose. So this guy's going to create here. Let's take a little bit of wire and wire this guy up. And this can work if there is less than, let's say, 100. Okay. I'm going to take another one of these. Our Q hotkey there. Dump this into here, and we now want this. So luckily we don't need to run gears over here in some odd way again. We just need these two materials at this point, these circuits and the iron. And we're going to just grab these. And then we're going to do similar again like we did to the belt, where we have a condition that this one can work and also a condition where this one can work. Basically the opposite conditions here. So we can keep some normal inserters in this box. And we'll just say... let's just say 50. I think if there's more than 50, this guy can work. And then we will need these later on for, well, we do need them for filter inserters, and then we can actually get even better inserters, which are called stack inserters, and they can move a lot more items in one, like, in their hand at once. They can pick up more at once. Than any of these other inserters, and those also do take fast inserters. So initially I was going to place these just in a box here to conserve some space within this footprint, but having them pass into a box where we can then transfer that to make filter inserters would be good. I think what I'm going to do though actually is I'm actually going to have them pass, I'm going to do much like this, where I'm going to underground this here a little bit, and I'm actually going to have them pass into a box here, and then maybe do the filter inserters here-ish. We also would like probably some long-handed inserters, so this is where things may get somewhat interesting. What we could do here is get a little bit, this is a little bit tight, this can still export somewhere else. We can find a spot for these upcoming underground belts to export, perhaps just underground a section here and have them export right here. But since this does require gears and iron but not circuits and these inserters, I think we can safely place this here. This is a very good spot for it since we have easy access to everything it needs. So let's grab some iron and then some gears. And this is getting a little messy. This is actually, believe it or not, this is actually a fair bit cleaner than most of my mall setups. I'm trying very, very hard to make this a nice, organized setup. So this is actually full here at this point, and this is going to kind of work just intermittently, like when this has fulfilled its, you know, its duty of however many this needs. Which, speaking of which, we should probably wire this up. Here, I'm going to do a very similar condition. Now, you can use the copy paste tool that you know we've been using for assembler recipes. You can actually use that for copying conditions. So if I shift right click the inserter and shift left click this inserter, it's now copied this condition. Of course, I want to change this to fast inserters. But sometimes this can be quicker. Other times, you maybe do just want the same exact condition on multiple things. Another example of this would be like something with smelting. Again, that's much later into the game when you get into some very late game mega base things where you would want conditions and train delivery. But you can copy and paste conditions like this, which is quite nice. And then these, let's go ahead and have these export. We could have them export here, but again, we know this machine's going to be here. So I think we're going to have this export. This one was going to export over here. We could have this export here and actually just have this entire section for kind of a drop-off zone, if you will. And these don't actually need to be passed into anything. So I feel fairly safe just having this be a hard cap. Again, nothing wrong with doing a circuit network. This is a little bit faster to set up. Just click and drag that there. And I'm going to go ahead and grab these. Maybe grab some of those as well. And let's grab some more belts. Let's grab some of these. some of those. And there we go. So we have a very, very big lack of iron here. It appears the engine's done. Let's work on fluid handling. So this will get us all this beginning stuff we need for fluids, mostly barrels, storage tanks, pumps, which we'll get into once we actually build those. Iron is having a very hard time keeping up here, and it looks primarily due to an iron ore shortage. So I don't really want to make all those circuits. Of course, we don't have very many circuits. But I'm going to come along here and just hold F to pick up all these circuits on this belt. It will deprive our science, but I think that's a worthy cause there to upgrade our smelting. And with this, we most definitely, I would suspect, need to upgrade power. I think maybe power is actually causing us a bit of a problem. Yeah, so when your power does get below what it can actually supply, everything starts working slower. Inserters will start working a little slower. Machines will start working slower. Miners will work slower. Everything. Just because they don't have the power needs met that they require. So it is important here that we upgrade our power. Now, I should actually probably do that before I put more miners down. It doesn't matter a ton. It'll just slow things down even more in the interim. But go ahead and disconnect this, of course. I believe that will disconnect the power to the entirety of our base. But it's just here for a quick moment. I need to rearrange some belt here for the coal anyway. Just grab those, throw some pipes. Again, I'm leaving the space with pipes just simply so we can put power poles here. Unfortunately, even with these medium power poles, you still can't reach both sets if they were right up against each other. We can later on, we can get substations, which have a very large reach, very large coverage area, but that is a ways away still. And I believe those require even the next level of circuits to even make. So we're just going to have to continue with this build. Nothing really wrong with that. It takes a little bit more space, but otherwise we just wouldn't really be able to power up our stuff here. Speaking of power, someone mentioned in the previous video, which is an excellent point in terms of powering machines and builds. This was not to power these inserters, obviously. It's just to connect our power up. And the reason I don't do this, what I'm about to talk about, it's just a playstyle difference. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. In fact, it's a very good, very valid strategy. What this person said, and I think what quite a few people actually do, instead of building their assemblers directly next to each other, adjacent like this, and then having power poles on each side, a lot of people will actually space them out like this. And then if we just use a ghost to demonstrate farther, and then they can place power poles, especially these medium ones, in between like this, and actually cover both entities on either side with one power pole. And there's nothing wrong with this. This is very power pole efficient. It's not space efficient. Not that one's better than the other, just mentioning that. It's not, you know, there's always usually a downside to most things in the game. I think, again, that there's just reasonable upsides and downsides to doing it either way. This is mostly just how I play. This is how I'd like my buildings to look. I'm using some extra power poles. For me personally, that is a fine sacrifice. But it is, of course, you know, does use more power poles and a bit more of a pain to power. So I did want to mention that as an alternative option. If you do want to just use one power pole, maybe you like how that looks better anyway, and that's awesome. But I did think that was worth bringing up. And thank you for mentioning that as well to the person who did in the comments. Because, like I said, I normally don't really play in that style. Just a personal preference thing, so I didn't really even consider mentioning it. And I think it's good to bring up different styles. I really do, because you know, Factorio is all about you know, fun and building how you want to build and playing how you want to play as well. So I think having, you know, different styles, different options is really good. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to use splitters to, rather than split a line, we're going to merge two lines together here. And we, of course, need one last power pole here. And this is going to just merge these two lines, because obviously this line cannot proceed any farther this side, so it's just going to kind of shuffle everything over to here. We are getting a little close there. There's no bases in view. However, for pure cautiousness, I'm going to Place a turret here. These miners will pollute fairly heavily. You can see 10 pollution a minute, which is actually quite high. One of the highest things, in fact. And they will be targeted pretty immediately if there happens to be a base that expands into here. And also, we won't have a miner right here anyway, since there's not really enough ore to mine, or reasonably to mine. So, placing a turret there is fine. And one thing I do want to mention in terms of kind of detecting expansion into your pollution. See if I can find an example. Not quite. Not yet on our map here. If I do see one, we'll probably see one later on and I can show you live. But a way you can tell if enemies are expanding into your pollution is the pollution, because this actually goes a fair bit into how pollution and the enemies work, which I've not mentioned yet. Is the spawners, the enemy spawners, actually absorb pollution. So much like trees absorb pollution, they slow down the spread of pollution because they kind of absorb it a bit. Enemy spawners, interestingly, do the same thing. Not necessarily at the same rate, but they do absorb pollution. So what you may notice sometimes is a section well within your pollution, say for example like where this oil is, just obviously it's not happening, but for hypothetical sake, if there was a square of pollution here, like a radar chunk square this big, that was flashing, and like showing not polluted, flashing between polluted and not polluted, much like this one. This one's doing it just because our pollution is currently spreading there. But if you see that same type of effect, like well within your pollution border, that is a very, very good sign that, very sure sign that biters are actually expanding in this area in your pollution, because they've built a new spawner and it's now absorbing pollution. So it's just creating a little absorption area inside here. So do watch out for that when you're looking around your map. If you see that within your pollution, you can be pretty sure there's a base in there. And that will happen. So even though we may look safe, if you do see that happening, then you may want to be on alert there that they have expanded to that area. So oil processing, we grab this, unlocks everything we need to make some basic oil, an oil refinery and chemical plant, as well as a pump jack here. Of course, we need to now unlock the ability to actually make the products. So sulfur processing will be one thing, and we'll go into the details of that once we build it, as well as plastics will be another one we'll want, and advanced electronics as well, which is the next level of circuits. These advanced circuits, also known as red circuits, a lot of people will call them. So our ore is starting to flow slightly better here. Not fantastic by any means, but I think I'm going to preemptively expand this a little bit. I would continue to expand iron. I just ran out of materials to make miners. Here in a little bit, we'll probably add miners to our mall, or our hub, whatever you would like to call it, refer to it as, because that, that's something we're obviously going to use a lot, pretty much throughout the entirety of the game. There's no advanced type of mining without mods. You can't really have robots mine for you, or some sort of train mining or anything. Both those type of options are available, I believe, in mods, but in vanilla, we just have the one miner. You can kind of incorporate that with robots later, or with trains, but you still need the miners. So we actually can't make many more of those, so we'll just use these for now. Consistency, at least. So, miners is something you're just going to use forever in your game. There's not really ever going to be a point where you switch to something else. So having those automated on a pretty decent level is really good. Let's get some gears, a few amount of gears we have at least. Of course, this problem I was referring to earlier in the playthrough, you'll probably run into a lot, particularly with iron and iron-related products, is you are out of the product to make the machines you need to make more of the product you're out of. Kind of a chicken and an egg issue, which, of course, you eventually can solve, just very slowly. But it's kind of a funny issue you'll probably run into quite a bit. So let's just put these last miners down. I would like to go finish clearing out that base that we started with. I actually switched this miner here because we know we actually have 2 additional miners on this side of this belt, and I like to kind of counteract that by having an additional one on this side, because this belt's going to come over and merge here. So having more on this side will make up for the lack of it on that side on the top belt, if that makes sense. Just a quick last minute decision there. And those guys will go, we're probably almost, yeah, we're almost at our power cap there again, just because we've added a lot of miners. We are currently have the ability to create 9.6 megawatts of power. We're using about 7 here on average. We can also take, while we're walking over here, we can take a little bit of a look at the graphs that we have available for us. So I've not gone into these much because it wasn't super relevant at this point. I mean, I've looked at the power one a few times. I suppose maybe to close out this episode as a last big concept, we can look at those. So the power one is, I believe, only accessible by clicking on a power pole. The others have hotkeys. I could be wrong. Maybe they added a hotkey for this. You could have to look in your hotkey menu. There's so many hotkeys. So I myself, I'm not even entirely sure, and it would take quite a while to look. But you can click on a power pole, and this will give you some good information about your power. So satisfaction, these can be a little confusing. They do have information. Amount of power currently being produced, out of power currently required, and amount of power currently being produced out of maximum possible power production. So basically, I mean, maybe that just made sense. I suppose it does make sense when you think about it. This is just saying we require this much power, and we're fully fulfilling that requirement. So we're requiring, you know, between 6.7 and 7 megawatts, and we're producing enough to fulfill that. That's what this graph means. And then this graph is we're producing this amount out of the maximum. So we're producing this amount we require, and it's X amount of the maximum we can produce. And then we have down here what is actually using power in our base. So miners are, of course, by far the highest thing. There's 50 of them using 4.2 megawatts. The next highest is 41 assemblers at about 780, 830 kilowatts here. Okay, maybe more as more turn on. Probably more turning out because we have more iron. Excuse me. And so this will show you. This will give you a breakdown. It's actually quite interesting sometimes. It can be deceiving. Like, I didn't actually realize I had 50 miners placed. I didn't realize I had 258 inserters placed. This can be quite interesting, especially once your base gets really big. You might be alarmed by how much of each entity you have placed here. So you can filter things as well, which is pretty cool. So you can just left click on it, and it will filter out everything except this. And you can kind of just see. And where that really comes in handy is you have a history. So we're on currently 5 seconds. You can look in the past minute, 10 minute, 1 hour, 10 hours, etc., etc. 1,000 hours are all. I love the fact they have 1,000 hours in there. If we look here, we can see a little bit of a dip. So this was a 10-minute graph, probably where our power ran out a bit, and I've now increased it. If we look at an hour, this is a much better view here. Going up, we can look at 10 hours. Of course, our save isn't 10 hours long, so this will cover the entire thing. And we can look all the way up to here. So this is pretty cool. You can even see, if you mouse over it like this and drag, you can see what's doing what. So you can filter these out, and you can either just left click it again to unfilter, or you can just click this button to reset. You can also search for things, so we can search for like assembly, ASS, assemb, and it'll filter it out. So there's that. Now lastly, you have with the hotkey of P, you can, which may think power, but it is actually production. And this is a very similar, much more filled out graph, but very similar to the power one. Very similar style and type of layout here. It's just for items you're producing. Now these are all jumping around a lot. It can be kind of crazy to look at because we're on a 5-second graph. And each item has an assigned color to it. So this is when filtering is really useful. So if we click on iron, for example, now we're just looking at iron in the production section. So this is how much we're producing. On the right here, we have a consumption. This is how much we're consuming. Click the wrong thing there. So we can actually kind of match these, see if they're kind of matched together here. If we look at 1 minute, it'll be a little bit easier to track, or even 10 minutes. So you can see that we're producing about 646 a minute average over the last 10 minutes, and we're consuming about 575 a minute average over 10 minutes. We were producing slightly more than we were consuming. See a graph here. Can reset all this, set that one, and this is now showing all items for the last 10 minutes. You can look at the graphs. You can look at everything here. So we can look at circuits. that over the last 10 minutes we had an average production of 56 circuits a minute, and we were consuming about 43 or 33. Sorry. So we can see here, like, well, last 1 minute, making about 49, 50 a minute. It's not very much, but we have a lack of iron. We don't really have much production anyway. And then much like the power, you can search for things. So I can say, search for SCI for science, and we can kind of see all the science popping up here. Look at 1 hour for the production of military, consumption, etc. So these are the graphs. You also have fluids, same type of thing. We're not really doing much with fluids yet, but this shows the same thing for fluids. Buildings, so this will show just like buildings and entities you've made. Pollution, which is pretty neat. So we can see here how much pollution we're producing. This is actually really cool. This is a fairly-ish new feature, and new as in it's not always been in the game. And I don't actually look at it very much, but it's very cool. So over the last hour, our miners alone have produced an average of 314 pollution a minute, 18K in total, which is pretty crazy. And then, of course, pollution absorbed by damaging trees. So there's that. And you can also hear, this is what I was talking about, you can see biter spawners, the pollution they've absorbed. There's not very much because mostly the spawners were outside my pollution. And then lastly, we have a kills graph, which just shows everything we've killed and when and how much. So that's pretty neat. Over the entirety of our save, we've killed 140 small biters, 6 small worms, 6 spider spawners, or spitter spawners, sorry, and 4 biter spawners. They are different. We've not really run into spitters yet, I don't think. And there we go. So there's all the graphs. I just wanted to show you, and then to close out this episode, we'll just clear out the remainder of this base here. But yeah, so the graphs can be quite helpful. Very, very nice for sure. I only have 1 turret, but even if I only have my gun, I could probably handle this with the piercing ammo. The graphs are something you will probably be using actually quite a bit as you play more, especially as you get into the later game, and experience more bottlenecks and such. Right now it's not super relevant. It's cool to look at for sure. Doesn't hurt to look at it. But later on you will be using it probably pretty extensively. So nothing else is in our pollution range here that I can see. I don't see anything expanding into it either, luckily. So this seems like a fantastic place to stop. And next episode, we can definitely start working on oil. I was going to say I'm quite worried we haven't found more oil, but we actually just found a very, very nice patch of oil here. 2,093%, totaling, looks like about 8 or 9 oil wells there, opposed to the very poor percentage one here. There's actually some more up here too. We're definitely going to grab this one. You'll notice this is in a percent, whereas these are not. I will go into that next episode. It's a bit much to explain right now, and will make more sense when we actually put pump jacks on it, but that is a little bit different, the way oil is displayed and used and consumed and stuff like that. So we'll touch on that next episode. Guys, I hope you found this helpful. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And if you did find it helpful, it's also much appreciated, since it will hopefully help other people find this and find it helpful as well. And if you're new to the game, which is what this tutorial is meant, who this is meant for. If you're new to the game, then welcome. Hope you're having a fantastic time. And if you have any questions and stuff, do leave them below. And if you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe to keep up with all the new content, of which there will be a lot now with the 1.0 release of Factorio. And I believe that will do it. So as always, any thoughts and feedback and questions you have, leave them below, and I will do my best to read and answer. Until next time, I look forward to seeing you all, and do take care.